Okay, so this is the second of Okay, so this is the second of Help's Hot Topics, and this week's topic is our third topic of the Help program, and it's digital skills that we're going to be looking at. And what I mean, I suppose, by digital skills, it's the internal systems that students use within SETU, like the virtual learning environment and Office 365. And all those basics, but also about looking at, I suppose, how we can use technology in learning and what are the benefits and why is it something that we would encourage students to do, and what kind of apps are out there that can actually make it all easier. It's not, it's not to put further learning or obstacles in somebody's way, but what that actually can make it easier. So that's the kind of thing we're going to be discussing today. So just to introduce ourselves, I have with me here John Balfe. And John, would you like to just tell me a bit about where you teach and so on?
Yeah, hi everyone. I teach on the Wexford campus mainly, and I teach in Department of Humanities on the social care program, the professional social care, and also early childhood education. And I've taught in lifelong learning on the Masters in Child, Youth and Family as well, and some of the standalone certificates like restorative practices and those kind of um, uh, standalone certificates that lifelong learning often run out. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, and the reason that I asked you here today was to kind of get the lecturer perspective, because I know that you've brought technology into the classroom in a number of ways and into projects and so on. So
Yeah.
that's why I've asked you to join me. And just myself, I'm the project lead for Help, but I'm also one of the learning technologists in the Teaching and Learning Centre in SETU. And my background would also be in assistive technology as well as learning technology. So I'm kind of coming, I suppose, from that perspective, from having worked with students often one-to-one in terms of providing technology and technology training, whereas you're the one who's kind of brought it actually into the proper group situation and encourages use like in the classroom proper. So hopefully between us we'll be able to give a kind of a good insight into this whole topic.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I guess
Mm.
first, before we have some questions here that have been prepared for us that we haven't seen yet. So we'll be going through those. But I guess just to start us off, the first thing is like, what do you think, John, would be, I suppose, the first thing the students need to know in terms of technology when they come to university?
Okay, well, I suppose probably the most important part and the one that they really need to navigate first is the use of Blackboard. So trying to get your head around that. And what I try to do as a lecturer is I try to organize the Blackboard page in such a way that it's very easy and accessible for students. So having folders clearly identified, that here's a folder with your lecture notes, here's a folder that are some readings and resources that you might find useful, a video folder, or a screencast folder, for example. And using the likes of screencasts as well, sometimes lecturers will upload short videos, 3 4 5 minutes of them, maybe explaining an assignment, or possibly looking at something that happened in class and revising that and doing maybe more supplementary information for students. So the Blackboard page is really important in terms of actually getting your head around your course, getting an idea of what the content of lectures are about, navigating lecture notes. So that's probably the most important thing, I think, for students to understand. And within that, I think the other part that's really important when it comes to assignments and for even feedback on assignments is the whole aspect of Turnitin, where you submit your assignment for review and to be corrected by lecturers. And Turnitin can be really, really useful, and it's very, very good to kind of get your head around how to use Turnitin in terms of the feedback that you might get on an assignment. So often lecturers will upload a digital rubric or a digital marking scheme that is attached to each assignment, and it clearly identifies and signposts areas that you've done really well in the assignment, strengths that you've brought into the assignment, but also parts where you can improve upon and maybe things to look out for your next assignment. And that is a really invaluable tool for students to try get to terms with, because the feedback you use from that will help you with each assignment. And even just there is an audio function there that you can listen to and turn it in. That sometimes, I would use this with assignments, that there's a 3-minute audio function that, I can give direct feedback to the student, and they can play it back and listen to it. And it's there, for them kind of on an ongoing basis. So that when, even if you find it difficult maybe to read the feedback, and you're not really sure what's about, you can listen to that audio function, and it elaborates and maybe explains some of the feedback that you're getting on the assignment. So I think they're really key for any student, using, coming into a program and using technology straight off. Your visual learning environment is your go-to. It's your first thing that you look at, really, and you're really, it kind of anchors you in your studies and thinking about, what I need to look at, what I need to do, even helping you revise, looking at exams, all of those pieces of information, those vital pieces of information for you to be successful in the course, will be on that platform.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that's probably the first go-to anyway, and probably the most important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's great advice. And just to pick up on a couple of things, because John, you're based obviously mainly in Wexford and Carlow, this would apply to Moodle as well, which is Waterford. And we just, I suppose, for students who are starting now, who are doing a 3-year or 4-year program or whatever, it's likely that from next year we'll be dealing with the same virtual learning environment across the campuses, or yeah, we're it's that hasn't been decided
Whatever that
yet.
might be, yeah. But
But
I know there's a couple of things, that a couple of different VLEs that the university is looking at the minute, yeah. So
exactly. So we will be kind of, I suppose that'll be a second little learning curve. But the thing is, they all pretty much do the same thing, and they have a lot of the same functionality. It's really about getting the concept there, and like you say, going in and seeing what way your lecturer uses it, because it will differ. Like lecturers, I
absolutely,
suppose, are like students in how comfortable they are with technology, how much they use technology, and so on. So, and of course, it'll vary dependent on the program and the discipline and everything. But I would say with all your modules, go on at the start and see what way your lecturer is using it. It's certainly a great way, even if it's just to get your materials. Ideally get your materials in advance, we would say, so you've actually had a chance as part of the learning process to look at slides before class, have them with you in class, and so on. And the first part of this topic, if you go to, so our website is setu.ie/help is here, and the digital skills topic you'll find there. We'll put it in the link as well with this video. And the first part covers exactly that, is the virtual learning environment, Turnitin, and Office 365, the kind of the primary systems, I suppose, that we're using. And I think once you get your head around that, that certainly will start you in good stead, and you can kind of go from there in terms of how much you use technology. And I suppose the other thing that I would say in terms of the first thing students should know is, like everything in life now, technology is a part of it. Even if your lecturers don't tend to use it very extensively, it will be a part of it. It'll be where you put your assignments in. You may have online exams, particularly if you're a lifelong learner. So getting comfortable with it early, just kind of taking the fear out of it for yourself, give yourself a bit of time and get comfortable with it. You won't break anything. And, I think that's a huge part of it. Just try, to kind of, I suppose for me, the experience I would have, because I'd be very self-taught around a lot of technology. And I suppose when people kind of say, oh, I'm not techie at all, I'd love if people kind of said, stop kind of telling yourself that paradigm or whatever, and just give yourself a chance with it. And it's not that you have to become proficient and amazing in everything, but if you kind of let it in and say, you know what, I'm going to give this a go, that can be a total game changer in terms of your learning and every aspect of life now. Really, it's impacted by it, but it can be hugely beneficial if you kind of say, do you know what, maybe I'm not ever going to be a hugely techie person, but I can give this a go and I can try it out and get to grips with it, you know. So that would be so yeah, so basically now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to share screen again for a second, and we have these 5 questions that we're going to try to tackle from our kind of different perspectives, I suppose. So the first one is dun, dun, dun. Oh, we've done that one. We're way ahead of ourselves. I didn't. So moving on to question 2. Would you say that technology plays an important role in the university? And if so, in what way? So I guess we've covered that to some extent, but maybe is there anything else we could add there?
Yeah, I think like I suppose from a student perspective, and again, it depends on lecturers. That point you made is very true. But you know, I would tend to use technology, and I use it in 2 ways. I think importantly for students is that, you know, I ask students to bring in mobile devices, and use, you know, your mobile phone or your laptop in class. But the flip side of that is that when we're not using technology, I ask them not to be distracted by that, you know, because that can actually get in the way of your learning, but also other people around you can be quite distracted if you constantly have technology open and unfiltered and just sprawling out everywhere. So it's about using technology appropriately. I think in the lecture room is critically important for, you know, just maybe to organize the technology, and even sometimes like with a PowerPoint or presentation. I think there's a function on PowerPoint where I think it's Control X, where the screen actually just goes blank. And I often use that function just for, you know, to switch off technology and to go, look, we just need to kind of reflect a little bit here about what we've just, you know, discussed, or maybe what's been presented to you. And to remove technology from the room, because the absence of it, you know, can actually then help the use of it too. So just, I think, you know, using technology for students, I think you know, a lot of it is maybe go with lecturers about what they're doing. Like there's often things I would have done in the class where students really are kind of unsure about the use of technology. So the likes of quizzes and polling, I've often used things like Mentimeter, which is a fantastic tool in terms of just like polling and getting a quick snapshot of students' understanding of something maybe difficult that we've done, or a difficult concept, or, you know, just checking comprehension. And often what I think students might know, they come back with something completely different, or maybe their own belief system impacts upon, you know, some of the information that's presented. So things like that are really important, just to check, you know, how beliefs and you know, ideas can be engaged with, and your own maybe understanding of things. Because often when you're lecturing, you might be delivering something, you might say any questions, and people say no, and then you move on. Whereas something like, you know, polling and quizzes really gets you to think, well, actually, do I know this? And if I do, what do I know about it, and how much depth of knowledge do I know about it? So the likes of quizzes, I've used Kahoot very, very well in some students love that, because there's a competitive element to it. And even individually, like you're competing, and then they have a kind of a thing of prize winners at the end. And it's but some students don't like that as well, and I can understand that, you know. So but it's more about thinking of what's the purpose of doing these, rather than did I win or lose. You know, it's more about checking your own comprehension. I've used Quizlet a lot recently. There's a great function on Quizlet recently. They've introduced an AI bot where you can upload your lecture notes. So, for example, I could convert PowerPoints into a PDF. You upload it into Quizlet, and it will develop flashcards based on your lecture. And it's a great way to check understanding at the end of a lecture by, you know, using a quiz based on the actual content of the lecture itself. And actually, students could use that function itself by signing up for a free account if they want to revise, for example, and want to go back over, you know, uploading notes, develop flashcards, and preparing for the likes of exams is very good for exam preparation, but even just kind of thinking about what you know or don't know about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say go with what your lecturer is trying to do, even if you think, oh God, not this again. Or like I've often had students who are kind of tech phobia as well, don't like that element and don't see the point of it. But there is a function to that in terms of actually your own understanding and checking your own levels of knowledge and deep understanding of concepts. And actually, a lot of it is the beauty of it is in failing a lot of actually not getting the right answer is where students realize actually I need to kind of check that and know a bit more about that.
Yes.
So that's an important function, I think. So there's kind of that aspect of it. I think that's really critically important in lectures.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just to explain to anyone who mightn't be familiar with those, just in case they're hearing the names of like Mentimeter and Kahoot and thinking, oh, what's all this stuff I have to learn? It's very much that it's just a tool the lecturer is using, isn't it? And you kind of create a poll, and then it's generally the way it's done is you'll either provide a link or a number that they can go to the app or just the browser, log in that number, and it'll access the quiz that you have set or the poll that you have set. And then very quickly, it's literally just a communication method, isn't it, really, that you then get to very quickly get this picture of what everybody in the class knows or thinks about that certain thing. So it's not that if you ask them to take out the phone, it's not that they suddenly have to learn a whole new app from scratch or anything. Like you say, it's very much that it's actually a function that really supports the learning. Like you said, that it's and sometimes getting it wrong, that's the place to get it wrong, because it's if you get it wrong there, you won't get it wrong when you're in the exam at the time that you need it, hopefully, would be the idea. And Quizlet, yes, that's one we recommended as well. We have it in a video. We're kind of saying to people, if you have a particularly long commute, which a lot of students do now, with the rental situation and everything, that's something possibly if you're on public transport that you could use that time to get Quizlet, create your own quiz. Even the act of actually creating the questions for yourself is part of the processing of learning that content if you choose to do it that way around. So they're all really really useful tools. And I think you're dead right. I think it's really about asking ourselves, when you made the point about not using technology at certain times, if you're being asked if it's a particularly reflective part of the class and so on, to kind of heed that as well, because we can kid ourselves, I think, and especially I suppose for our online learners or anyone who's blended learning, when you're online and you've made the class open in one window and then you have other tabs open, and our brains just start to, and we kind of convince ourselves, well, I can multitask, I am still listening. Most of the time we're really not still listening. I think our ability to multitask has been completely overrated to get us to do more work, and focus is actually, so maybe to stop, whether it's whichever end of the spectrum you're on in terms of how much you like technology, if you're use it a lot, maybe ask yourself, is this thing I'm doing with technology at this time actually supporting the purpose of this time? I'm in class, I have 3 tabs open. Are they serving a purpose? Are they actually, supporting the reason that I'm in this room right now? Or at the other end of the scale, then, if you're quite resistant and you think, I don't want to learn any more apps, or I don't want to whatever, well, hang on, is this actually going to improve things for you? Is it going to help? And just to be open-minded about it on either end of it, I would say, is really, really, really key, because it is important. I mean, the question there is technology an important role? Does it play an important role in university? It plays an important role in everything now, as I said before. So, but it's how you use it it can be the difference between like really being effective and actually completely ruining something in terms of your attention span and so on. So
even I suppose students might be accustomed to things like TikTok and Instagram and God knows what's out there that I'm not familiar with as well. But that is a particular type of technology, and it does a particular function, but it's very specific, I think, to a generation or maybe to needs of people in terms of social media. And it's interesting, like SETU have developed now a degree in influencing and social media, which I actually happened to see on a BBC program that was being mentioned.
Yeah.
Well, there's different types of technology for different things, and the idea, I suppose, is that we'll be introducing. And again, I think that point you're making, don't be, kind of afraid of the technology that's been introduced. You're not expected to know the technology. It's what the technology does and the purpose of it and how it's being used by the lecturer in the room. The other point, I think, you mentioned about commute, and actually a lot of students are commuting, and that's become a phenomenon now because of accommodation crisis and students commuting long hours. What I found very useful, I think, and I've recommended for students, is the use of podcasts is a fantastic way to get kind of information, about maybe a subject that you're looking at in your modules or in your program. And I've often recommended, there's some fantastic podcasts out there, educational podcasts that students can use on a commute, for example. And it might play for 45 minutes, an hour, which is usual commute times on average. And students can kind of use the podcast as a way of kind of a flipped learning, or kind of a way of learning about something outside of the room, coming into a lecture kind of well prepared. Then students often are often being asked to kind of read something before lectures, and if you're commuting, this is a fantastic way to do that. And I know a lot of the library journal databases have an audio function. Some of the articles I've put up on my Blackboard page for students, there's an audio function in that where they can actually just listen to the article being read. And I know some platforms do that very well, the likes of Canvas. I'm in UCC doing my doctorate, so in Canvas, you have a function, you can automatically listen to the audio MP3 or MP4.
Well, we have that now as well, John. I don't think it's in that long, but it's Ally, which is embedded within the virtual learning environment. So students will have access to that. Beside any piece of content that a lecturer adds, you'll have a little A icon, and you can click on that to download into alternative formats, including the MP3. Or if, well, this isn't now commute wise, but if you find that, especially if you have a lot of reading to get through, if you want to listen as well as reading. Actually, a lot of people find that we always think they kind of want the MP3 so they can listen on the go, but actually a lot of the time what they find particularly helpful is to be listening as you're reading, and there's a function for that too in Immersive Reader, and that's in Ally as well. And that's particularly good if you're getting through a lot, if you're tired, if your concentration's going, to have it coming in both through the eyes and the ears can really help. So there's great options like that. And the same with the, like you say, the text to speech around articles, but the podcasts are great because like you're getting that outside perspective as well. You're hearing the whole context that your subject sits in.
And often the time you're getting expert outside advice. You're getting the person who might have written the article that your lecturers are talking about. You're often maybe hearing their voice, or maybe people, academics who have maybe peer reviewed it or dissecting the concepts or ideas, and are coming from an expert point of view. So they're a very invaluable tool, I think, particularly when you think about just how do I even get my head around something. And a good way to start off is that kind of surface learning. Maybe it's kind of getting just the first initial information about something. And a podcast is a great way just to kind of think about it for yourself. And then using the lecture as a platform to kind of really delve into it, go deeper into that. It's a very nice way to complement the learning curve, that kind of initial introduction to information. It's a very nice, easy way to kind of listen to it and then come into, into the lecture and delve deeper into it,
and have that kind of prior knowledge already primed, and you take in so much more then when you walk into the lecture, because you've kind of activated your brain with that part of any knowledge you already have in that area. On to the next question then. Question 3.
Question 3. So what about courses that may not seem to be technology related from their title? For example, social studies. Do you still think that it's important for students on these types of courses to engage with technologies? And if so, why? Okay, there you go.
That was a tough one. You got a tough one. The particular way that's worded, I wasn't sure.
But a very appropriate and relevant question, I suppose, for the area that I teach in. So courses I think that are don't have a technology title, and like it's kind of building on that point you were making, Sue, just about technology is everywhere, and actually it's interesting that came up as a question, because one of the conferences that I'm looking at next year is the title of the conference is a social work in a digital industrial age. And some of the sub themes are, how is the likes of professions like social work, social care, using technology to change identity and practice of social workers? And I've actually have to get a conference, I have to get an abstract in the next couple of days to submit for that conference. It's been held in Lithuania, and it's a social work research conference. And the focus of that is really kind of maybe how social work has engaged with digital platforms, digital learning, digital technology. So it's interesting that that's a question, because actually professions that are kind of considered to me maybe humanities or human professions are using digital technology all the time, or it has, it has changed the platform of how we work and how we engage with each other. And that's from the pandemic, I suppose, that created an acceleration of that in some ways. I know from colleagues in my former work, I've worked in Department of Justice, Department of Health, I've worked in TUSLA, a lot of them translated or transformed onto the likes of Zoom very quickly. You had to get very accustomed to Zoom meetings and to Teams meetings, so that, technology has been used in that way. But even just, when you go into a social services, for example, from my works, my previous life to lecturing has been 17, 18 years in practice. And in that, even when I left practice, the digital environment was becoming critically important.
Right.
Things like how you maybe engage with a client, for example. So somebody using the likes of a social care service or a social work service, there is now a requirement for you to write up, what you actually did with that person, to become accountable in your practice. And all of that is done digitally. You write up notes, and you follow and track monitor the progress of your client. But also, you use the digital platform for the benefit of the client as well that you're working with. So everything is online. And if you're filling in a social welfare claim for somebody, that's an online application usually. And even just that kind of psychoeducational work with clients of how they navigate the digital platform is critically important to advocating for clients and for advancing their needs. So even, the fact that you mightn't be comfortable with technology, you have to get pretty comfortable quickly when you're in practice, because the requirement in the way the world of work is at the moment is that, you do need to be able to navigate not just the basics of email and Zoom calls, but also how you navigate, different digital environments that, government agencies require, but also social services require. And by doing that, you're actually doing a lot of advocacy work for your client group. So, it's critically important in those kind of professions, even though it mightn't be obvious, but being familiar with technology and how to navigate, and even just, helping clients in a digital sensitive way is a vital part of your role. And even some of the requirements that have come in from CORU, which is the Health and Social Care Professions Regulator, one of the key proficiencies they talk about is actually about digital literacy, being familiar and au fait with digital literacy. So now it's actually a core requirement of professions like social work, social care, occupational health, nursing, any of the medical professions, physiotherapy, that you do have key skills in digital literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you learn that? You learn that hopefully in your college environment. I suppose that's why we have, the something that replicates the workplace, using the likes of VLEs or using kind of technology in the classroom. That does prepare you for work, even though you might kind of roll your eyes and think, oh God, not this again, or, we're not doing this quiz again. But actually navigating those types of technologies is almost a simulation for the work environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, those kind of key aspects and skills that you build up in your college education do stand to you, whether you think it or not. They actually do. Even just how do I get into this form? How do I get into that website? What way do I download? How do I save documentation? You know, how can I create a file and folder and organize myself? You know, even the likes of using Google Docs. You know, I've used Google Docs in the classroom where I get students to, you know, collaborate on their note taking. You know, so that there's kind of one document for notes and students can contribute. So it addresses kind of gaps that students might have missed. Other students have access to it. Somebody who mightn't be there can see the notes as well. And it also is a good way for me to kind of check understanding of what they're actually writing up in their notes and seeing is that actually what was being presented to them. So, you know, all of that activity that you're doing is preparation for real life work engagement.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I would totally agree. And I had that feedback from students before in certain situations where, say, I mean, I taught myself a long, long time ago teaching film production, where I asked students to create, not create a website in that they had to develop it from scratch, but to use a kind of very simple website, Google Sites, to put together some information. And there was kind of, well, why we're not learning websites? Why do we have to do a website? You know, and yet I would imagine anyone who's kind of working in that field today or in a lot of fields will have had to use a website in terms of promotion at some point. And all those skills are transferable. I mean, really what you're learning, the apps are so kind of, once you try them out, so many of them are very user friendly. And they really direct you to what to do. And really the skills that you're doing is you're putting together information. Say if you're having to do PowerPoints or whatever, or use any different type of presentation tool in class, and you might think, I'm not going to use this a huge amount, but so many interviews now require presentations depending on the discipline. And really you're learning about communicating your idea, how to make something concise, you know, and the technology is really just a tool to support that. So again, this is the time to give it a go and try it out and get the hang of it. Rather than having to do it for the first time, maybe in an interview or in a job situation, or like you say, when you're working for a client or with a client or whatever. So I think that's yeah, you know, even if you're a little bit kind of thinking, well, this is extra work on top of the actual work of my course, you're now asking me to learn this type of technology as well. It will generally stand to you, because even if you never use that particular tool again, it's all about just being that bit more comfortable. And there's trades that you would never have thought. For example, I had a great chat with another lecturer, Pascal Hart, for one of our earlier topics, and he works with apprentices and stuff. And I was talking to him. I was saying, I know someone who's a panel beater who would have no interest in technology whatsoever, and is now working on cars that are completely automated. And if you have to take off a door to fix a door, you have to understand all of the electronics of that door. And you know, when that person started in that trade many, many years ago, never would have thought that technology is something that would be needed, and has had to upskill and just do it, and has done it self-taught, using technology to teach them about technology, going onto YouTube and that kind of thing. So it's just, if you kind of it's the whole like teach a man to fish thing. I think if you kind of take the fear away, it opens up a whole other world. Everything's at your fingertips once you kind of say, actually, do you know what? I can do this. I can give this a go. And there will be benefit to it generally. And obviously the way it'll be used and how it'll be used in your profession will vary so much from one to the other. But it's likely there'll be some element of it. So being able to say, you know what, I can give that a go because I've learned other things as well. That's the piece, you know, I think that you take away from it. So question 4.
So we all tend to have a tech tip or app that we'd recommend to students. What kind of one that you wish had existed when you yourself were a student? So what one would you recommend now? Okay, good question.
Okay, will I take that one?
You can
first?
Take that one. Think about it.
And I might ask you to stop sharing, John, because I'm not sure what way it'll record otherwise.
Yes.
This is our first time doing it this way, so never quite sure with Teams what the end result's going to be. So what did I wish it? That's a great question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I tell you, for me, simplest of things, and actually, but I think it's still something that students sometimes aren't aware of. Touching on what you've mentioned there, something like Google Drive or Office 365, whichever or OneDrive rather, whichever kind of file sharing, online file sharing system you use,
Yeah.
to really make use of that. Don't still just save your files locally to your machine. I would say, for me personally, because I lose stuff all the time, don't even just save them to USB keys. Make use of OneDrive or Google Drive. Um, if you upload your stuff to there, you can access it from anywhere. You can't lose it. You can share it with somebody. You can share it with a peer to get them to read an essay. You can share it with a lecturer to get, you can have it set that they can either make edits or they can just make suggestions that you can look at and decide whether to take those or put those suggestions in place or not. If you share a document with them. You can submit stuff that way. You can, for group work, like you say, the collaboration, you can actually see in live time who's contributed what, which can be good in a group work situation. And then
Yeah.
you can revert to earlier versions as well. So if you do something on and you've lost something, whatever, you can actually go back to what it said last week or whatever. So those things. So in terms of the reason I wish I'd known that is because I remember at the last day of like dissertation being due, the printer breaking down and having no way to send it to another computer. That printer
I
got the
remember that
brunt of
moment
my
myself.
stress on that day.
On a
Um,
floppy disk.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Almost. Um,
Students be
uh,
looking at this going, what's a floppy disk?
I was
It's up
just
there
past
with
the floppy
cassettes.
disk stage,
Look
just
up
for
floppy
my
disk and cassettes.
own
Yeah,
vanity.
yeah.
Yeah, there was hard drives, there was USB keys, but the idea of, oh my God, it's not working on my machine. How do I get it to somebody now to print it elsewhere? Like it wasn't that easy, but I still find that. And even if you don't need to use it a huge amount, I have students now submitting videos to me, little videos that students have been good enough to make about different topics. And a lot of them still don't realize like how like this one is too big to send by email. What'll I do? And it's something I don't think we're really teaching students enough of. Use those file sharing systems. You can share
Yeah.
huge files. There's not stuff taking up space on your computer. And generally, when it comes to if you are having to do a dissertation or a thesis, those files are too big to send often by email or something like that. And if you're going
Yeah.
back and forth to get feedback on them, that's what you want to be doing. So, and that's in our kind of basic first section of digital skills. It's a little bit of information about Office 365 and all those things that it does. Get to grips with that, and it'll just help you organize everything going forward throughout your
Yeah.
program. Yeah.
And upload to the cloud and it's stored there and you don't have to worry, it's there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
You.
I think it's something that really has transformed the digital environment, but certainly the learning environment is the whole introduction of I suppose. Um, and you could be in the camp of saying AI is evil and bad, and it's going to be the end of the university. Um, I don't hold that perspective myself. I think it's actually a tool similar to the way when Google was introduced, that it's a new technology, and I think we have to deal with it the same way, as kind of evolution of technology. So I have a very much more positive perspective on AI compared to the kind of doomsday perspective that it's just going to create, a whole classroom of people just cheating and trying to get one up and hoodwink, and certainly circumnavigate their learning experience. There's certain tools I think that are just phenomenal, that what they can do, in terms of helping your learning, not substituting, but actually almost like a learner assistant,
Mm-hmm.
or a
Mm-hmm.
research assistant. One in particular that I've come across, that I've actually started to use myself a little bit, is an app called otter.ai, OTTER.ai. I have to be kind of careful about this because some of the licenses for this don't have the ethical approval for ethics committees. Um, so there's an issue there that, because of where data is stored and how they
Mm-hmm.
process data information, you need to make sure that whatever app you're using, particularly for research, does have I suppose, the blessing of your ethics committee. But Microsoft Office, and Teams performs the same function, where you can actually just record the audio. The audio will transcribe automatically, and from what's being said. And even I did a piece of research a couple of years ago just on the MA in teaching and learning, And I used, Teams. There's a function on Teams where, when you're interviewing someone, it could be an hour-long interview for a participant in your research study, and it will transcribe and save what they're saying and what you're saying. And automatically then you have your transcript of that interview, which saves an incredible amount of time. Like they expect that 1 hour of interviewing is probably about 6 hours transcribing, usually, which is painstaking. Whereas you have something like this, you can actually upload a recording. In Otter AI, they have it, you upload your MP3 recording and it will transcribe in minutes and even seconds what you have, said in the interview and what's been said. And on top of that, it will highlight, you can actually program it to highlight keywords or themes that you're looking for in your dissertation. So say you have a research objective that is something to do with leadership, for example. It will highlight how many times leadership was mentioned throughout the interview, and it'll bring you to those parts of the transcript where that was maybe discussed or important points around it. So that has certainly transformed the landscape, I think. And again, AI, I think, is useful in terms of actually cutting out the time of tasks that weren't necessarily of any productive learning. They were hard work and doing things, and certainly there was a learning in maybe the work ethic of it. But in terms of actually technology being assistive and technology being something that advances human capability, I think apps like that and functions like that are invaluable, really. And that is the future, whether we like it or not. That is what's taking place at the moment. People are saying it's a revolution. It's been around for some time, but certainly like ChatGPT and AI has. We have to be really careful how we use that, and students need to be thinking about academic integrity and honesty when using that. Rather than saying just give me this essay, there are ways that is being monitored and checked. So it's not a case that students can go do that, but certainly maybe getting ideas, around how you might structure an essay, for example, could be a way that you might use artificial intelligence. So I think certainly those kind of digital apps and that revolution has transformed learning, and that's something that I think if I was a student back then would have been a great assistance to me now.
Absolutely. And you touched on the academic integrity side of it there. So I suppose the caveat with it is it'll be, I think lecturers will, a policy has just come out across SETU around the use of AI, and obviously there's systems in place to check for it and so on, and it'll maybe affect the way things are assessed, will change in response to it to ensure that academic integrity. But at the same time, so yeah, I would advise students, there could be differences between how one lecturer uses another. Some will actually integrate it into assessments. Others, there might be an absolute blanket rule that it's not to be used. So yeah, as you say, just to apps check, and it's something that's developing, like SETU, the TLC, where I work, and my colleague has developed something called AI Mate, which is going to be used by lecturers hopefully to decide on their policy around AI in their modules and stuff. So double check it, but it can definitely be used in a really helpful way. Like if we see it more as something that's like an automation, like the calculator, that if we use it effectively, it can really be so helpful. Like you said, things like Otter AI, and there's a couple of other similar tools, but that are paid a lot of the time, that also kind of have a note-taking function. So you're not just left with a transcript, but the transcript is great for when you're at that research stage and you're doing interviews. I suppose for the students who are a bit further along, it's like you say, to save that amount of time, because there's nothing hugely to be gained from a person sitting and typing out an hour-long conversation. So if we use it for those things where there's no inherent value, it's just a laborious process, then it's brilliant. But again, it's like what we were saying earlier, is asking yourself the question, is this supporting my learning? Am I walking away from this with a better understanding, or has it done the work for me? So it's using it in the right way, and hopefully that people will get the best out of it that way. Yeah, so they're two good examples of things that we didn't have when we were.
Absolutely. Yeah.
doing it first time round anyway. So last question then, question 5. Finally, if you were a student now and you have a tech related query or you needed tech support, would you know what to do or where to go or who to ask? Okay. Do you want to answer that one first, John?
From a lecturer point of view, I think if you're a student in a in a room with a lecturer, where would you go for help around technology? Like if it again, this depends on the lecturers. Some lecturers are very comfortable with this, some are not at all. So if it was in maybe a lecturer that did have was comfortable with technology. For example, if a lecturer came to me about, or a student came to me about help around technology, certainly I'd be able to assist in terms of what I'm doing with them in the room, and but maybe an app that I've asked them to do, or maybe a podcast I've asked them to download, or even the other day lecturers had, or students had a problem with one of my presentations, which was a different type of presentation I was using, and they came to me and said, look, it's not downloading, so I had to reload it and convert it into a PDF and those kind of things. So I think those kind of initial questions around technology, of how it's connected to the lecture and maybe the module that you're doing, your go-to really is in the lecturer who's using that technology. So that, for example, I would use maybe technology like Screencast or Padlet, or mind mapping tools like MindMeister, that a learning technician might say, well, actually that's not my area. I'm not involved in that. So in those kind of situations where a lecturer has introduced a new app or a new device or a piece of technology, your go-to person is that lecturer to query, look, this is not working for me, how do I access that, what way can I get into this app, or whatever. But I think in general, queries about technology, we have a lot of technology assistants or learning technologists on campus, or people who assist with technology, IT department, for example. So if your queries about maybe not getting access into Blackboard, queries about, emails won't open, I can't register for this, I can't get onto Blackboard or Moodle for this, your go-to really is the IT department or your IT expert. I know on the Wexford campus we have one person, Seamus, there, who all the students know, because we're a small campus, so everybody just goes to Seamus, and usually devices turn it on and turn it back off again. But usually he sorts out individual queries, or the administrator in the campus as well. So the administrators usually have a role or function in terms of registering students or getting them onto Blackboard. So there are certain designated people that you would go to for those particular general queries. And that's necessarily I would be comfortable with, because I don't have a function or a know-how or an expertise in how to access that, or I probably don't have the permission actually a lot of the time to do that. So it depends really on what the issue is. If it's a learning issue in terms of like the module, your lecturer is your go-to. But outside of that, the general queries, which a lot of students, the majority of people will actually have questions about, it is the IT department. I think on the Carlow campus is on the 3rd floor or 4th floor. There's an IT department there for students to go, an open help desk there for queries, printer queries, for example, or access to Blackboard queries, which is a great function actually, because I used it myself the other day. I couldn't get into a printer, and they just seem to have some kind of magic wand that maybe they're able to do things that I wouldn't have been able to do. And that's, I'm sure it's the same in Waterford. There's a help desk there. I'm not familiar with the Waterford campus, but in Carlow and Wexford there are certain designated people that you go to. So I think that's the go-to.
Yeah, absolutely. And to shamelessly plug help here, our own program in the first section, getting started. In every section we have a tech corner that kind of highlights a particular app that's useful for that topic, whether it's academic writing or it's group work or whatever it might be. We've kind of picked an app that helps. So that's a nice starting point for kind of those additional little helpful things. But in the first topic in the tech corner, what we have is basically the contact information for the different supports for exactly those kind of things around the VLE, even turn it in, or emails, or the fact that your modules aren't showing up. Those more like the practical stuff, the initial things that you might be likely to encounter. We have all the contact details there, whether it's like you say IT in Carlow, or in Waterford, then the CTEL as well. So it's the Centre for Technology Enhanced Learning, who do all the Moodle support there specifically. So you've got that also. And then there might be a case, like you say, if it's more of a, say, one of the tools for something like PowerPoint, perhaps you could get support there through something like a learning support tutor through the library, or there might be existing resources about that, around that as well. There is lots of information out there, and we have tried to gather some of that together. So I would say they'd be your first ports of call. But the other big thing I'd say is, I know someone said to me a long time ago, I was asking, I had a couple of particularly techie friends, and I asked them, and they said Google it, and I thought, well, that's really helpful, thanks very much. And actually, to this day, I'm like, God, he was right, because I had to just go and Google it, and I went down a rabbit hole and eventually found the answer. And I learned so much, and it's kind of my motto now to this day. It's like the least helpful and the most helpful thing you can say to somebody, because it goes back to that thing of like learning to learn. It takes the mystery out of it, because you become independent with it then. Now, I'm not talking about sitting for hours if your modules aren't shown on Blackboard and trying to get to the bottom of it yourself. That's probably some kind of technical error or a registration issue or whatever. Don't,
And outside your control.
yeah, so don't spend time getting stressed and thinking, oh, is it something at my end? Very likely, if it's one of those initial problems, like you said about the printer, somebody else will be able to fix that in a heartbeat and save you all that time and energy that you could be using elsewhere. But if it's something around, say, PowerPoint, or like I said, OneDrive or whatever, please do use help as a starting point for some of those. But after that, if you start to kind of realize, yep, I can find that on YouTube or in the help manual or whatever the app itself has available, that kind of thing. Once you've done it a few times, you realize everything, like I say, is at your fingertips, and then the possibilities are endless. Like, literally, I know that's quite a cheesy note to end on, but it's like, I think once you discover that, it really opens doors. So that would be my go-to as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, an important point you made there, people often forget this and overlook it, but the library and library staff are phenomenal. And I have to give a big shout out to our library staff in Wexford, Kim and the team down there. Like, when students go in there, she goes above and beyond helping them access databases, journal articles. The stuff, even navigating those databases is a minefield, for students, never mind for lecturers as well. Like, it's just, she gives you a very simple formula of how to access technology that way. And, stuff that's important that you need to kind of access. So, use the library staff as well, because they actually have a phenomenal amount of information about how to access online ebooks or e-journals or databases, and help you in such a way that you can actually get directly to what you need, as opposed to waiting for hours and learning a different way, because that's where students struggle a lot, actually, is where do they get the information from when they're asked to look at, readings or journal articles.
Okay.
So library staff are really important in that regard.
Yeah, and maybe again, it's one of those things to take a bit of time. If you can go in, like, they're so willing to help in all of the libraries. So if you are on campus and can go in, even at the start, even if you only do it once at the start of the year, to just get the hang of where to start, basically, and the ebook stuff, and it is confusing when you look at it on the website for the first time, the databases, the ebooks, and you search for something simple and you're not getting, what you'd expect. So if you can go into the library, or there is also online kind of workshops are run in some of the campuses. There's resources that are already available. Look at the resources first to support you and give you the kind of how-to before you dive in, and don't wait until you really, really need to be doing it, like coming up to an assignment time when there's already stress. Try and have it done in advance. We will be having discussions like these around the academic writing section, citations and referencing, and that'll hopefully cover some of this as well. And we will have hopefully somebody from the library as well discussing this, which will be great. So listen, that was the end of our questions, and thank you so much. And I hope that we have kind of given people a bit of a perspective anyway on
hopefully you know, and again, there's elements in this that you probably will find useful and elements that you won't. So just take what you need from things. The same way, you know, when you're doing readings or assignments or essays, take what you need to get from it, you know. So hopefully you can find some use out of what we discussed.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Even if it's just to kind of maybe think a little bit differently about it, or whatever it might be. Yeah, exactly. Take what you need from it is key. Okay, thank you so much, John.
Okay, so take care.
Thank you.